Welcome everyone to our social emotional learning resources for well-being webinar. We are very pleased to have organized and prepared this webinar for all educators, caregivers, and parents who are interested to learn more about their own well-being as well as their children's well-being, whether it's at home or in the classrooms in schools. We want to start by sharing a little bit about how we came up with this project and why we are so passionate and what's our intention with it. So I will present a little bit about who we are. My name is Lila Vasilescu, and I am here today with my friends and dear colleagues, Marius and Andrea. We are all part of the amazing Verita Foundation and Verita International School. These are two organizations, and we have been very lucky to be part of the social emotional learning team that has been teaching in Verita International School for the last 5 years. And because we have learned so much along the way, we have decided that this is something we want to offer to all educators, especially in public schools, but also to anyone who's interested about learning more. So we have started the Verita Foundation, where our mission is to share what we have learned, our experience, but also, as you will see along this webinar, very important resources and tools that we can use in the classroom and at home. And at the beginning of last year's challenging times, we have initiated a project which is called CHEC. As you can see, all of us here have it in the background. It's Compassion in Education Resource Center. Our intention with it was to put together all of the amazing resources that we have gathered along these years and to offer it to everyone who wants to explore this part of education that we consider to be of utmost importance for the development of children, but also because we have learned how important it is to be as adults in our own setting and in our own lives more balanced, to share it with everyone around us. So I will let each of my friends and colleagues to present themselves. We are a small team, but we are really passionate about our work and determined to share as much as we can. I can say about myself that my main motivation to do this work was the fact that it somehow came along in my life in a moment where I also became a mom. And so it became really relevant for me to work with myself and to be a good model for my child. All right, then, let's see. I will pass this on to Marius now to tell us a little bit about himself.
Hello, everybody, and I hope you get the most out of this webinar. I've been with Verita School since 2016. Due to a lucky incident, Lila actually checking her spam folder and finding my desperate plea to bring mindfulness in schools. So ever since, I've been working with all age groups, and I'm focusing mostly on high school students, implementing the C curricula, social, emotional, and ethical learning, which we will talk about later. And increasingly more in recent years, I've been working closely with Lila and Andrea to widen the awareness and the practice of SEL in our school, in Verita, but also in state schools and private schools in Romania, and hopefully abroad as well. I'm very eager to share what we've learned, and now let's hear Andrea as well.
Hello everyone, I'm Andrea Alexandrescu. I've also been with Verita International School for almost 5 years. And now I am only working for the foundation because, as my colleagues have already shared, we are very eager and determined to bring what we've gathered in our years of teaching in Verita International School to the wider public, maybe to public schools or to other private schools who are interested in finding out more and eventually applying social emotional learning in their environments. I am a certified therapist. I use DIR floor time, which is a wonderful model, but we won't get into this right now. And I taught social emotional learning classes in Veritas School, and now I'm a facilitator for social emotional learning programs in Verita Foundation. And I am a mom, a proud mom of 2 teenage kids now, and very, very happy to be here and to share what I've learned so far. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. So now that you know a little bit about us, we want to start this webinar by presenting a little bit about what's going to happen. So you have a clear image. We will have 2 parts of the webinar, and the first part will mainly go into this big concept of well-being that we've heard so much, especially in last year with the COVID pandemic and everything that's been going on in the world. But also, I think this has been emphasized more last year due to the general context, but it's something that we have been focusing on in our work in school and in the foundation for quite some time. We will go into these concepts of co-regulation and self-regulation, and we'll learn more about them, and then into what stress is. Part 2, after we have gathered some information about how about these concepts and how stress can affect us and what we need, we will go into the actual tools and practices that can help us build our resilience. And let's see. As I said, we are starting with a general talk about well-being. And I have to go a bit into the history of our work, because as Marius and Andrea have already mentioned, in the beginning, even in our school, in Verita International School, we have started small with just around 30, 40 students. And we were focusing a lot in the beginning on mindfulness practices. It was something that we were passionate about. The founder of the school was very passionate about it. And so this is how we started. And we were working with children a lot, up to the point where slowly, as the school started getting bigger and we had more and more students, we realized it's becoming more difficult to be physically in contact with all of these kids every day. And also we realized that a lot of the teachers that were working with the children experienced different states of stress, and that their own well-being was interfering with how they were able to be present with the children and to offer their knowledge, their care, and their attention. And this is how in time we realized, and we made a switch from focusing mainly on what to do with the children in class to how we can work with ourselves as adults around the children, whether we're talking about educators or caregivers or even the parents, and how we can shift our attention towards our own well-being, because this is an experience. Our well-being is an experience that we have where we feel healthy, where we are happy, and we can thrive. And if we can function at our best, then of course we can share the best of us to the others. So this is how we have come to the point of addressing the needs and the stress factors of the educators and the parents. Well, this is probably not new information for anyone, but I think it is important that we categorize a little bit the types of well-beings, because throughout our days and our weeks and months, we go through different experiences, right? And what we want is mainly to be happy, right? Everybody wants to feel good. We want to be able to enjoy our lives, to be present in our relationships, to be proactive, and to do our work the best way we can. So we have categorized these 5 types, major types of well-being. We have our emotional well-being, right? And so this means that in life, when we go through stressful events, we have the ability to manage that stress and to apply different techniques and tools that can get us back into a state of feeling good within ourselves, and to generate emotions that lead to such good feelings. Of course, then we need to be physically fit and to be healthy, right? So this has been of utmost importance, especially lately. But of course, it's this ability to have our body functioning at its best, to take care of ourselves, and to act sometimes as detectives in a way, to see what works for us and to apply that in our daily life. Our social well-being, we are social beings, and we want to communicate, want to be in relationships. This is also something that lately we have realized how important it is, and how we rely on our relationships to feel good. We want to have meaningful relationships, deeper relationships with others, and to have that support network around us, that whenever we are in a more difficult situation, we have people that we trust, that we can rely on. Loneliness is something, is one of the major stress factors in the world, and something that can lead, they're all sort of interconnected, all these types of well-beings, but we know that loneliness, especially in older people, is something that can have a direct impact on your physical well-being as well. Workplace well-being, right? We spend a lot of time at work with our colleagues, even if lately this has been maybe online, but it's a place where we find ourselves, where we find meaning in our lives, where once we have discovered how we want to contribute in the world, it's the place where we meet with mind-like people, and we want to pursue our interests, and we want to have fulfillment in what we do. So that's also a very important part of our lives. Societal well-being. This is where we are part of a community, and of course we want to engage in that community. We want to participate in different activities, and we want to feel that we are part of a bigger whole, a bigger picture where our contribution is important. So these are what we have described as the major types of well-being. But where does a person's well-being start? This is a major question that we have asked ourselves, because we wanted to really go deep at the root of what can help us thrive and be happy and feel good in our lives. So we go to science, and to Andrea in this particular case.
Thank you, Lila. Indeed, when we talk about well-being at its roots, we start with a very early age. We start with the people when they're babies. And to talk about this stage, we refer to one of my dear models, which is called self-reg model, Stuart Shanker's self-reg model. And this model, of course, it's not the only one, but especially in this model, this co-regulation process, as we name it, is described very, very nicely. And we start from this idea that the baby human is really not very much developed at birth. And because of that, it needs that warm and caring support from the main caregiver from the very beginning until a pretty late age. So we know that the baby's brain develops well only if it can connect really deeply with the caregiver's brain. So in a sense, we have two brains functioning together in what Stuart Shanker names the interbrain. Yeah. So it's somehow a wireless connection, yeah, between these two brains that function together from the more developed, more mature adult brain going towards the less developed and needy baby brain, offering support, offering modeling, helping the baby's brain and nervous system regulate energy levels, and basically helping all the time the baby and later the toddler and the young child to develop at their functional best. So, Lila, if we can go, yes, thank you, to the next slide. We see that through this interbrain connection, the child is constantly helped to, first of all, feel safe and secure. Yeah? And it's being offered these many opportunities to juggle its energy levels, yeah, from feeling calm and peaceful, but also feeling focused and alert when the situation asks for it. For example, when we want to feed the baby, we're going to maybe make a very, happy face, big eyes, enticing gestures, nice voice, so we can get the baby's attention and be able to feed the baby. When we want to put the baby to sleep, that's when we lower our energy level and maybe we rock the baby and we whisper or sing a lullaby. So we experiment with these different energy levels and input or types of input, so the baby's nervous system learns how to regulate itself, right? We see on the screen these two terms, down regulating and up regulating, according to the situation. So we know that this co-regulation process doesn't stop in childhood. We don't stop after we helped the baby and the toddler and the young child get to the process or to the stage where they can self-regulate. We do that, and the way we co-regulate with the baby and later child, of course, changes throughout life according to how the child is internalizing what we do and gets to this stage where they can self-regulate. But we also continue to co-regulate even when we are grown-ups, because co-regulation in the end is this process where we can synchronize with the other person. We use these affect cues and gestures. We try to read what the other person might feel through these gestures and facial expressions. And we do this in order to help each other stay in this or arrive at this state of calm and peaceful, state, but in which we can still be engaged with each other. Because as Lila mentioned earlier when she talked about well-being, this part of social well-being is really important, because we really can help each other function well if we stay in relationships. Lila, Marius?
And thank you, Andrea. And understanding how important co-regulation is at home and how important co-regulation is in the process of developing a human baby. This process doesn't stop at home. And this, in a way, informs us as educators and as school to imagine a place for the child, where this co-regulation is continued and even enhanced by our relationship, by our own relationship with the children. So when they come into class, creating that space that it's caring, it's compassionate, it's safe, ensures that the baby's brain internalizes this well-being state and the feeling that he's cared for, he's soothed when he needs. And this doesn't stop in the early years. This continues in primary and middle school and secondary and so on. It takes different forms. So it takes, the relationships change. So one sees the educator in a different role as facilitator of experiences where the child can grow and thrive. So this means that the school and teacher's role is to teach both the basic, so the early years, and the more advanced academic curricula, while offering this constant warm and caring environment and making sure that everybody is in it, not only the teachers, but also the admin staff and the specialists and so on. So the whole community needs to contribute to this effort to hold this baby in his process of development in compassion, while delivering the academic content at the appropriate level and support. So first and foremost, the educator, as I said, becomes a facilitator, which means he is there not to only to deliver the content, but to embody the very values and understanding that we need, we know the child needs. So, for example, when we are in class, shouting in class, even to make order in class and to address behavior, is internalized by the child as a potential threat. So this does something to the human brain, shouting. So constant shouting might trigger in the children a sense of not being safe. So this puts the onus on the educator to internalize this this process of adopting and exemplifying SEL concepts, so social and emotional learning concepts, for his own well-being as well as for the others' well-being. Yeah, so as I said before, in addressing a child's needs, so in continuing the process of co-regulation and helping the children to self-regulate, which we will discuss shortly, we have to take into account that the children don't come to school leaving their emotions at the door. So they come in maybe after being agitated, pushed around by the family to hurry up, to eat fast, to get dressed. So in a state of agitation, maybe the traffic was bad and both the parent and the child got restless and so on. So when we have the children in class, they come in at various degrees of being more or less regulated, and we have to take this into account before engaging in academic content. And we know ourselves that as adults, when we come into class, how are we feeling? How are we doing? Do we just become this robot that starts immediately teaching without addressing our own emotional and emotional needs first? So we as teachers and our students, we are all in this together, in the fact that we are affected and driven, and we manifest emotional content that manifests in behaviors of all sorts. So we need to take this into consideration whenever we interact with children, because, as said before, we teach not only content, but the behavior, skills, and hopefully we teach this ability to self-regulate in children. Andrea?
It's me, Marius. Thank you. All right. So we've mentioned a bit about self-regulation before, and as the name itself sounds, it makes it feel like it's something that's entirely our responsibility and something internal to any individual. But the matter of fact is that it's something that we develop through interaction that we have with other caregivers and adults around us. And I'm talking now from a child's perspective. As Andrea also mentioned before, to reach to this point, actually, we will have to first have that interaction with an adult that makes us feel safe. And that models different emotions that we slowly get to internalize. And that's the part of co-regulation. But we want to explore a bit more about self-regulation now. So as we've talked before, in a child being, especially at birth, helpless in so many ways, which is different from many other mammals, means that it needs a lot of support. And so the influence that primary caregiver has, and it's usually we are talking about the mother, right? Because it's that first contact that the child has. And this can facilitate the child's process to understand emotion, to express itself, and then furthermore to modulate, their thoughts and behaviors as they grow. So self-regulation is really important, but it starts with this process of co-regulation. Now, we are addressing in this webinar the idea of self-regulation as something that starts at home, as we've mentioned, and that is continued in school. And so both the family and the school have this pivotal role in this process. So what we do is that we want to offer these abilities for our children to be able in their developmental process to get to that point where they can manage their thoughts and emotions. We are talking a lot about behavior when we talk about social emotional learning and self-regulation. So, and this is something that, many times, especially with the educators, I've experienced this. It's something that's of utmost importance, because what happens many times is that we have those uncontrollable, maybe, or unexpected behaviors that we are faced with in the class. And so we are trying to understand how that works, how the child has reached that type of behavior. And this means going a bit further in the process, because what we want them eventually is to be able to learn, to be able to focus their attention, to be calm and alert during class. And this means that in many stressful situations, it's our ability to respond to that process instead of react, instead of having a reaction on the spot, which most of the times happens. So this is a long-term process. I think it's something that I will keep repeating during the webinar, that it's something that takes patience and this understanding of the fact that it starts with our work on ourselves, with our own self-regulation, with understanding how we work, how our brain works, so that later on we can look at children's behaviors, whether it's in class or at home, understanding the processes behind or before reaching that moment. As I've mentioned, so learning to self-regulate means the child, with the co-regulation help of the caregiver or teacher, and I think Andrea already mentioned that this process of co-regulation does not end once, we say, okay, my kid is 12 years old now, so this can stop now, he's on his own, he can deal with that. This is a long-term process. And so what it means is that we teach them how to identify these uncomfortable and unnecessary stressors and how they can work on reducing and eventually eliminating them, so that they have more space to use positive energy and to be able to concentrate and learn, which is what we want them to do in school, right? So sorry?
A big part of this process is understanding stress. So the way we negotiate stress, the way we understand stress, and the way we mitigate stress, this all have to do with our ability to manage ourselves, to get a grip on ourselves, as they say. So what is stress, and how can we use stress? Because stress is something that happens. Life always brings stressful situations about. So how do we negotiate and mitigate stress? First of all, let's get a common understanding of what stress is. And this comes from Stuart Shanker, who developed the self-reg model, or the self-regulation model. And stress is something that requires us to burn energy to remain operating at our functional best. So in order for us to be in the best possible shape, we have to burn energy. We burn more energy the more stress we encounter. So in this understanding, stress is absolutely essential. We need to in a way an adequate amount of stress to be able to make sense of the world, to make sense of what is happening, and to make sense of our own body and mind. So the problem appears when there's too much stress going on. And what this means is when there's more stress than we can handle. And we run the risk of becoming stuck, as we say, in high zone or low zone of stress, which we will talk about next, and it becomes toxic. It requires us to burn a lot of energy just to remain functional. Okay, so, Lila, if you can help me with the next slide. In understanding stress, it also helps to understand how the brain responds. And for this, we have a simplified version of the brain here that talks about the reptilian, limbic, and neocortex part of the brain. Of course, they all interact together to create this unified experience. However, these parts are singled out because they have specific functions that they perform, and understanding the specific functions of each part of the brain helps us in understanding how stress affects the body first and foremost, and how this impacts on our mind and our ability to function. So at the bottom, and you can see the reptilian brain, the brown part, it's very ancient in evolution, which means it came before the others. It's not that it's more important or less important. All parts are important; they're functioning together. But in this understanding, we share this brain with, for example, even lizards. Even lizards have this brown brain, which deals mainly in the basic functions of the human body, like breathing, like digestion, and like the circulation system. Above it, there's the limbic system, or the mammalian brain. We share this with other mammals, and it's called the red brain because it triggers strong, risky emotions. And usually when this happens, it's happening outside our conscious awareness. So we feel sometimes that decisions are made for us, or we jump into an action before thinking. Well, this is our limbic system called to action. And this action is immediate. It's a response that usually helps us be safe and sound, because this is the main role of not going through the third part of the brain, the neocortex, which is the newer part of the brain. And as you can see in the picture as well, it covers both the limbic and the reptilian brain. And this newer part of the brain, it's usually very specific to humans, and it allows us to have the ability to think in perspective, to have critical thinking, to speak, to learn. So all these functions that we associate specifically with us humans growing up. So as you can see, Stuart Shanker said that the calmer we are, the more the blue brain is in control. And this is what we want for ourselves, and this is what we want for our children. So that blue brain, where all these executive functions of the brain are, and that we want to tap in children and we want enhanced and developed, these happen, and this neocortex is online whenever we are calm. In emergency situations, real or imagined, so it doesn't have to be a real danger, the red brain is in control, and then if the danger is so high, then we reverse, and the brown brain is in control. And this is when we, as I said again, we have behaviors and actions that we don't control in any way, because they are there just to ensure our survival. So when the red brain, when we go into the red brain, we generally act without thinking, and our behavior is caused rather than done for a reason. And for learning more about what happens in the brain and body, I will give it the word to my colleague Andre.
Thank you, Marius. I hope you can hear me because there's apparently some renovation happening in a nearby apartment. So there are some drills and bumps and thumps and all sorts of noises. And so there's a stress going on at its in its original, very, very original meaning, when it was the stress of materials, right? So let's see what happens in the brain and body when we have stress in a person, in a human being. So we see that some major systems function less well. They are so-called dimmed, right? So we see that digestive system among them. We see the immune system, hugely important for our body. Yeah? So these systems don't get enough energy anymore under a stressful situation, because this energy goes into fighting whatever is coming towards us, or fleeing from it, or in worst case scenarios, freezing, where we also employ energy to tense so much that we freeze. We see that prefrontal cortex is dimmed, and sometimes so partially offline, and sometimes it goes totally offline, like when Marius showed us, when the brown brain is in control. We see that the cellular repair is affected. And we see this mentioned that muscle constrict. So this means that the human brain is not tuned in anymore to react to. So when children, for example, are in a very stressful situation, we happen to have those situations when we talk to a child and they just cannot hear us. They just don't respond, right? Of course, other systems get turned on, or they function at a higher rate. And of course, we talk about the stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, which raises the heart rate and the blood pressure and the rate of breathing. So there's an overall alertness and reactivity in the body. The sweat glands open, sometimes the hair stands up. So we have all these manifestations in the body. Some of them, and most of them, cannot be seen, let's say, with the naked eye. They can be felt, but not always recognized. Because as we've seen, the thinking brain is not online to make sense of what is happening. And as I said, some of these signs can be observed. What could those be? So if we are in a state of stress and maybe we touch our chest, we can feel, or even without touching, we can feel a racing heart. we can see even in ourselves and in other people that there can be a shallow and rapid breathing. Yeah, so the breathing rate is increased. And generally, it's very obvious that either we or the people we relate with are in a state of tension. Yeah, the muscles are kind of contracted, and we have this aspect of being rigid. Yeah, and so generally, each stressful situation can be defined within this equation of high tension and low energy, because the stress, the tension that we stay in, the longer we stay in that tension or tensed situation or state, the more we lose energy, because stress is consuming, is eating up our energy. And I will ask Lila to go through the domains from where stressors can come and affect us. Lila.
Thank you, Andrea. Yes, well, there are so many. Not good news, but this is the reality. And it helps to know who are we dealing with, right? So avoiding that does not help. I've tried that a couple of times in my life. Sometimes I still do, because we don't learn easily sometimes. And I admit I needed a lot of information and understanding the science behind how this works. And then a lot of practice, and still there are many times when we are confronted with all these stressors from all these domains. And what happens is that I've noticed when I can name them and I know where they're coming from, I can then develop certain strategies that I notice work for myself. This is a very personal process. I think it's important to mention that we each find different ways that help us deal with different stressors. So we have the biological domain, right, where I can be bothered by high-pitched noises. Like, for example, before starting this webinar, there was some more going on the street in front of my apartment, and there was this noise, and it was really bothering me. It can be too much light, right? It can be lack of sleep, okay? Been there with my son, not sleeping really for 4 years. That's a really important biological stress domain. We go into the emotion, right? This is one that we are working with a lot in our social emotional learning process of teaching ourselves and teaching our children how to cope with these risky or strong emotions. And they can be, these really positive, like you get really excited about something, you are really happy, you've won the lottery, it's Christmas morning, you've scored the goal. Or they can be negative emotions like fear and anger or stress or blame, or so many of the things that I admit that last year I've been through many times, up and down, up and down. We have cognitive stressors, right? It's, for example, I can relate to that in the beginning of my process of learning a lot about social emotional learning, because there was so much content that we were addressing, and we were uncovering so many areas that we were learning from, that at certain point there was so much information, and sometimes it can be difficult to process that. This goes for children maybe sometimes in school, when they have to learn for certain exams, when it's hard to cope with so much information, and in different work environments where we find ourselves. And it's also a relevant one that maybe you can relate with. Our social domain relates to the fact that sometimes we don't pick up on different social cues, and we don't understand the effect of our behavior on others, or noticing other behaviors that people have and not really understanding what they mean. And we can find ourselves being confused and not really understanding what's going on, not really knowing what that person is going through. From an emotional point of view, maybe. The prosocial domain refers to those situations where people around us are dealing with different types of situations, and usually difficult ones, where we might feel it's hard to cope with their own suffering, with their stress. Especially, I can mention here a very personal experience I had during last year, and unfortunately, I think many have been in such situations where we have learned about friends or even family members, close family members, who are going through different difficulties, where there were health issues with COVID or financial problems or different other situations. And we were sometimes unable to really be there for them. And it's hard to witness somebody else's stress. So that's the prosocial domain. All right, now that we have learned a bit about these domains, we have to understand that this process of self-regulation is also a very good invitation and opportunity for us to explore, as detectives, we say, how to address these unexpected behaviors, right? We see there, this is the big iceberg, and what we see on the surface can be this unexpected behavior that we sometimes have as adults, and here we are also talking about children. But underneath that, we have these domains that we've mentioned, and the invitation in this process of self-regulation is to stay curious and open to what's really going on, and to try to understand how is it that we have reached this point where I start yelling at someone, or I shut down and close myself up and don't want to communicate with others. So we are using this process of being detectives to better understand what's really going on. And it's really useful because many times we are only faced with the behavior itself. And instead of reacting to that one, we try to respond in a wiser way, which can lead to a better understanding of ourselves in the process. And to do that, we have a very beautiful map here from, again, Stuart Schenker, that we are using. And we have these 5 steps. But as I will go through them, I think it's important to mention that at one point, after we have practiced these steps over and over, we can enter this wheel of different steps from any point. And we can use that one to either recognize the stress or to reframe it or to reduce the stress. So it's a frame that we can use in time after we've practiced enough from any entrance point. But of course, it helps to recognize the stressors to begin with, right? If we are, let's say, in a room and there's too much light, okay, we can reduce the light. If I am hungry, I can eat. If I'm thirsty, again, if I feel after a conflict that something has not been resolved and I need to talk to the other person. So it's the first step that we can do. I can have that process where I can recognize what is the stressor that I'm dealing with right here. And of course, the next step that we are hoping all the time is to reduce the stress as much as we can. Again, I will put in something that I think it's really relevant. I've mentioned that this is a process, that we need to have patience, and that we need to be really gentle with ourselves in the process, right? Sometimes it's not easy to reduce the stress load immediately, but we can take small steps, right, to stop what's going on that produces that particular stress, right? And so by doing that, we also have this opportunity then to reflect on this part of what's really going on there, right? To have this stress awareness, which goes into the deeper layers of our consciousness in a way, and to be able in the future to find maybe better ways to respond with very particular strategies that work for us. Such strategies like reducing the tension, restoring energy, or developing resilience, which is a big part of what we are going to go into next. Reframing the behavior. That's also to say that, for example, if something happened, right, and I have not been able to apply any of these steps, and I have reacted in a way that, many times has happened to me, that I regret having spoken in a certain way to someone, or being angry. And so what happens next is that once I realize that, I can put a lot of stress on myself just judging the fact that I wasn't able to respond in a wiser way. And so reframing the behavior also means looking at it from a different perspective, where I can be that detective, and instead of putting more blame on myself, trying to understand what was it that made me react that way. How did I come to this point where I could not control myself and I had to start yelling, or I had to feel this anger and this tension that I could not really contain? So trying to look from a different perspective that could help me get into this wheel of steps of self-regulation, and trying to go back to my resilient zone, as we will see next. All right. This is a very important part that we are always focusing on, as we have noticed in our experience that there's a very fine line between self-control and self-regulation. And Andrea can tell us a lot more about this.
Well, thank you, Lila. I won't stay on this for too long, but just to say that when we self-regulate, we use this detective hat, and we go and find out what the stressors are and how we can alleviate them, how we can, in the end, employ more, let's say, appropriate or healthier methods of coping. But so in a sense, we are trying to look for ways to restore and gain more energy, while in self-control, we just use more and more energy to try to control a situation that is already influenced by a huge amount of stress that is eating up that energy, right? So when we put more energy, or we try to use more energy in a state where we already have very little, what's going to happen is that we can maybe control that situation for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I don't know, when we probably need to control it for another hour or two. And that's not going to happen. So in the end, people will snap. Yeah. So behaviors will surface, reasons for them will remain maybe unknown if we don't use the detective skills. So just to remember how to make the difference, we say that self-regulation is always searching for those hidden stressors and for ways to restore energy, while self-control usually looks only at the surface behaviors. We remember that iceberg that Lila showed us, and we only refer or address the tip of the iceberg, while all those stressors are underneath, and many of them are hidden even when we start our detective work. So sometimes we need a lot of digging and analyzing to find out what is happening. So we focused on 3 major things in this first part of our webinar. As we remember, Lila went through the concept and the types of well-being. We described and explained the processes of co-regulation and self-regulation, how they are related, how self-regulation cannot usually happen without co-regulation, and how both processes are done both by the family and the school. and later on in life by important adults in people's lives. And then we dived into the concept of stress. We've seen what stress was and the many factors of stress that can influence us, and the 5 steps of dealing with stress, or learning how to manage our nervous system's responses to stress.
In our second part of the webinar, we will address the topics of resilience, practice, and tools. A few ideas for the classroom of how to implement social and emotional learning, the what, the how, the where, the when. And in conclusion, covering a little bit what we've talked so far. And if all this seems a lot, and it is, and if all this seems like it's a lot to take in and digest, well, that's okay. It took us 5 years and we're not there yet. So just reminding ourselves that to take all of this with a grain of salt and a grain of gentleness. These are information that hopefully we will get a chance to revisit in other workshops, but also you get a chance to see them live in your classroom. And this is both your practice and a chance to, as students and as learners, take this information in. We ourselves are taking it in, so gradually and with patience. So we've covered self-regulation in the first part, and it's generally is the ability to manage our thoughts, emotions, and actions. And this is what we want to instill in children. This is what we ourselves are aiming towards. In more specific terms, so self-regulation requires learning to recognize and respond to stress in all its many facets, positive as well as negative, hidden as well as overt, minor as well as traumatic or toxic. So at the neurophysiological level means attending to the brain-body responses to stress, including energy expenditure, recovery, and restoration. So basically, it's what we do with what's happening to us in a way. Okay. In the beginning, we've mentioned the fact that we will address resilience, and as we tackle self-regulation and as we want to build these skills, we are basically working the skills of resilience, widening the resilience zone. Why we call it a zone? You will see that we are working with a model that describes the resilience zone as something that can be expanded and worked with. So what does the resilience zone look like? Well, before we address this, let's have a common understanding of what we mean by resiliency. And this is a definition from the Trauma Resource Institute, which focused a lot on this topic and has a very inclusive definition. So while we generally understand by resilience is bounce back after in the face of adversity, we can also understand by it a larger process where we, it's both an individual and a community's ability to identify and use individual and collective strength in living fully with compassion in the present moment, and to thrive while managing the activities of daily living. So it's something we do every day. It's not separated from teaching, it's not separating from walking to school and back. So it's in every situation where we deal with life. This is a chance for us to learn and work with ourselves and with others. Coming back to the zone, we can imagine this resilience zone as riding the waves of life. And as long as we stay in this window of opportunity that we call resilience, we kind of think of it as having a proper response. So when we are well in managing stress, when we are the bosses of our feelings, as we say in class, we usually face the situations by delivering an appropriate and adequate response to whatever happens to us. So we can imagine that we experience sensations in the body, emotions, thought of all kinds, and this happens on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. This happens every time. But our resilience zone, while we stay in the resilience zone, we offer adequate responses, and we are calm and alert. We are creative. We are enjoying the experiences of walking, of teaching, of whatever we do, and we generally have resources that we can tap into. As you can see here, we kind of go through all this every day. We experience emotions of maybe calm, at one moment excited, the next maybe we're tired, a couple of hours later we become angry or happy or scared. So this can happen to everybody, so nobody is exempt from this. Being in the resilience zone means that we are able to offer the proper response in the situations. When we are happy, we don't lose touch with reality, for example. And when we are scared, for example, we manage to have a grip on ourselves and to calm ourselves down or to address the danger if it's the case. The problem appears when in the resilience zone, if there's a big enough trigger, and we call it a stressful event, we get bumped out of the resilience zone, and we get bumped out into a high zone, as we call it, a zone of high energy and high tension, where we feel maybe edgy, irritable, we feel anxiety, panic, and so on. Or in the low zone, it's a zone with low energy, low vitality, low responses to the situations, and maybe we can experience depression, sadness, feel isolated, exhaustion, fatigue, numbness, and this happens to us as well. The problem is, if we have a difficulty, when we don't have enough resources, we don't have someone to call to, we don't have the energy to deal with the situation, we can remain stuck in the high or low zones. And when this happens, that's when the toxic stress that we talked in the first part becomes increasingly harder to cope with. And as long as we stay here, we burn a lot of energy, we burn a lot of resources. Our responses to situations might be displaced or inappropriate. We might yell for no matter what reasons. We might get upset for the smallest possible reason. So we kind of lose touch with ourselves, body and mind. Okay. So and when talking about resilience zone in the beginning, we said that we can increase or expand the resilience zone. We all start with the resilience zone, which is given to us by nature and nurture, the experience we've integrated or not throughout our lives, the training we had, the resources we had or not. So some of us might start off with a very narrow resilience zone, where each and every event has the potential to bump us out of the resilience zone into the higher low zone. Some of us, on the other hand, maybe have a high tolerance to stress. They can experience stress without losing a grip on reality, without getting knocked out. But we all have the ability to bounce back. We all have the ability to increase this resilience zone, to incorporate ever widening and ever increasing waves without getting stuck in the higher low zone. And now we gradually move on into how we can address this resilience zone and how can we expand the zone. So we're getting into tools and practices.
Thank you, Marius. So we're staying in the zones. As you can see, we're moving from this resilient zone to a very beautiful and extremely efficient curriculum that we have used in Verita International School, which is called the Zones of Regulation. Andrea has introduced this curriculum to us from the early beginnings of our teaching of social emotional learning in the school, which was around 5 years ago, and it's something that has stayed with the students ever since, because it's a very simple model, and being color-based, it's extremely relevant for younger children, but also for older children. What it means is that we are addressing emotions. Yes, we are in this part of emotion awareness, where in order for us to develop those tools and to be able to stay in the resilience zone, we need to understand how we work. We need to understand how these emotions that sometimes we encounter in our everyday life feel like. And when I say feel like, I mean that we need to identify them in a way that we can name them and we can place them in our body. We can recognize them in other people, so that afterwards, because we have identified them and we know how they feel like, we can find what works for us so that we can come back to that okay zone. In this specific curriculum, the zones of regulation, as you can see, we are putting emotions in different colors, and we are starting from that low zone, right, where the energy is low, in the blue zone, where we might feel sad or sick, where we might be tired or bored in school or in other situations, right? We move onwards to the green zone. This is the zone where we feel happy and calm, where in an educational context, it's where we can pay attention, we can focus so that we can assimilate information. It's one of the reasons we are green as a logo, because we want the green zone. We want to learn as much as we can of how we can stay in the green zone or come back to the green zone. Moving onwards, we have the yellow zone. This is where our tension starts to rise a little bit. We might feel worried, maybe if I'm a kid in school and maybe my brother or my mom is sick at home, or maybe, we are being a little bit silly. We have a bit of more energy in our body, and we notice this in kids especially, but not only. And this is where we lose some of the control, right? Moving onwards, we get to the red zone. It's pretty obvious from the visuals that this is where the level of energy and of tension are pretty high in our bodies. We might be extremely mad or furious, our body is out of control, but in the same time, we can be what we call elated, right? We can be extremely happy. And again, we cannot control our bodies. We want to jump up with joy and happiness of something that might have happened. Why it's so relatable to children is that apart from the fact that we're using colors, which is really helpful, we are using this model of the traffic light, which is pretty aligned with the colors in the model, right? So we have the green, right, the good to go that we use at the traffic light. And although here in Romania, we might not have the blue zone, but it's and in many other places, this resting space that you have on a highway where you need to stop because you realize that you don't have enough energy to keep going, right? The yellow zone is that part where we still have some time where we realize something is off, that something is really not right. And it's that sign of, okay, caution, you're going into an area that might be dangerous for you with risky emotions. So you might want to look into that and maybe slow down. So it's kind of that caution sign. And of course, the red sign, the red color, the red light, which means stop. Okay, so this is where we really need to become aware of the fact that we have lost control. Very important to mention is the fact that we don't use these zones or these colors to say that one zone is better or worse, that this color is good or not to be in. We don't use it to make children feel that a certain emotion is good or bad. We all go through all colors. If we are being honest with ourselves as adults, we know that throughout one day even we can go through all of these zones and all of these colors. And the important part of this curriculum that we have focused on is that we have this common vocabulary of using many situations throughout the day where we can kind of like put the flashlight, as we say, on a certain situation and just bring this invitation to be more aware of what's going on with you. Where might you be now? In what zone? Once we have had the opportunity to work with children and for them to understand each zone and how it feels like when we are in that particular zone. And there are many amazing activities to be done with children in this curriculum. And as I've mentioned, it's I can really say one of the most important curricula we've used that has stayed for a long time in school, and that many children still use the colors and the vocabulary. In addition to that, throughout our years of teaching social emotional learning in school, we have adapted or even used per se different types of curricula that we have found to be really aligned with our model, especially the self-reg model that was kind of like at the foundation of everything we were doing. So these are different types of curricula that we have used. As I've mentioned in the beginning, when we started, it was a lot about mindfulness. And when I say mindfulness, I mean it in a secular way. I mean, we were using different practices from Mind Up, but also Mindful Schools curriculum, where we are working a lot with attention, right? Which is an important attribute that children need when they are in school. And with this part of self-awareness and understanding how our body works, how our emotions work, where we feel them in our bodies, and so on and so forth. And after many years of combining and discovering new curriculums and having, the joy of exploring this and experimenting with children in class, we have encountered the one curricula, I would say for now at least, because this is where we are right now, this one curriculum that has really made us feel like it's an extremely complex and comprehensive framework of putting together a lot of the things that we had learned so far. And this is called SEE, Social, Emotional, and Ethical Learning. And it's the one curriculum that we are working with right now. And that part of our CERC project is to have it finally translated fully into our native language of Romanian and to deliver it to public schools here in Romania. Why is it that we really like this curriculum? The added value that we saw in it comes in very specific ways. It means that we have learned along the way that it's important to look at what's going on at a deeper level, with ourselves and with our children. But at one point, it's really important that we address the situation as it is in the moment, and we start with what's working with in that specific classroom with that specific child. And so this constructivist methodology is something that we really appreciated because it focuses on the strengths, not so much on the weaknesses. The one big component that I was really inspired by is the part of compassion and care. This curriculum brings forth the importance of bringing these terms, not just in a conceptual level, but in a really embodied and experimental way, where we work with compassion and with self-compassion before anything else, because that offers us the possibility to understand more of how we work and what we need in order to be able to offer to our children in class or at home. We have the ethical engagement, right? As I've also mentioned before, social emotional learning has a lot to do with behavior, right? And so this concept of ethical brings a lot of value to this curriculum because we are looking at behavior from this point of view as well. I've mentioned already about working with our attention. This was part of our mindfulness initiative, and we understand now even more how important this is in our children and in ourselves as adults. the resiliency and trauma-informed practices. I would say this is probably one of the most unique parts that we had not seen in other curriculum, and that it's extremely relevant for us, even more since with our Verita Foundation, we are working with different communities and underprivileged children in rural areas where this part of trauma is really important to be addressed before anything else, because we need to understand what's going on with children and adults and to understand their needs before we can give any practices that might help them. Our systems thinking and equity focus, again, is the model, teaching model that they use, and that's extremely helpful and really easy to work with. And this is the major perspective shift, right? We have in our society and in the world in general a tendency, to punish what's wrong, to put the blame. It's been, I think, for me, to be honest, something that especially during last year has come up a lot. And I think that it's high time we pause and we really give ourselves the time to look at different perspectives of being in the world. This old and conventional way of looking at the world and at people as being bad and needing to be punished for what they've done, because people, we just look at their behaviors and we only judge what's going on the surface. This is the shift that we have to make, and this is what Sea Learning is doing in a very gentle yet firm way with a lot of science behind it, because we have to look at science to understand what's going on. And this is where we are offered the possibility to understand that a certain behavior might indicate that that person is going through a certain amount of suffering, or that that person, however many efforts they make, they just don't have the resources right now or in that particular moment to do better, that we are all doing the best we can in that particular moment. And so once we learn from a scientific point of view of how we've gone also here during the webinar through how the brain works, and we understand how trauma can impact the brain of a child or an adult, we have that small opening, that little door into a different perspective where we can really tap into the tools that we need to do better, to at least have the intention to make a change, because then we realize that we are inherently resilient, but that we need the context and we need the tools and we need the life experiences that can build these skills in us. So we all can learn these skills. It's the good news, it's the neuroscience part that's really been a breath of fresh air to me when I started looking into not just this curriculum, but even before that, of understanding that we can work with our brains, and that we need to understand how these skills of well-being that we've mentioned so far can really reduce our suffering. Because at the end of the day, this is what we all want, right? We want to suffer less and to be happier. So this is what has really made us fall in love with this curriculum. The fact that we understand the science behind how certain behaviors can appear. And we, by understanding that, we can start with this fundamental question of, let's see, understanding that you have gone through trauma in your life, or that, your life experience hasn't been really helpful for you to develop these skills. Still, you have reached this point. It's obvious that you have managed somehow. So let's see what worked for you, what is right about you, what are your strengths, and we start to build on those strengths. And I think this is extremely relevant, not in children, but in adults as well. So we can start at any age, at any time. I'm mentioning this because for a lot of the educator or sometimes parents that we talked with, it seemed like, well, I'm really hoping that at least my child can access these skills, because for me it's too late anyways. It's not too late, and we can really start anew at any given moment. All right. So let's go a bit into these actual tools, because we've mentioned a lot about them. So it's high time we see what are some of these tools and how can we develop resilience in us and in the children that we work with. Let's see.
Okay, so I'll take over from here. And we invite you to practice with us or practice later at home to give it a try to one of these strategies. It's a little bundle that we chose from many others. That's why maybe the numbers on the screen don't make much sense. 1, 2, 7, 5. Yeah. We have a group of what we call Help Now strategies. They are from the SEE curricula, and they are very short tools that we can use when we are feeling, let's say, overwhelmed emotionally, physically, mentally. Yeah, when we have those troublesome recurring thoughts that bombard us. And these strategies are part of the what we can do to build resilience. And I invite you, Lila and Marius, to do this practice with me. So we want to look at these 4 options. We have to practice it for maybe 1 minute. Either slowly drink or sip from a glass of water. Look around the room and name 6 colors you see. Or close your eyes, or maybe keep them open if that's more comfortable, and notice 3 sounds that come from the room and then 3 sounds that come from outside the room. Or maybe touch a piece of furniture or another object or surface. You can notice the temperature or the texture. And after practicing one of these strategies for around a minute or so, try to put the attention on your body and see what you feel inside. What sensations do you notice? Are these sensations pleasant, unpleasant, or maybe somewhere in between, what we call neutral? And of course, anything we try may promote either pleasant or neutral sensations, but also sometimes we can observe unpleasant sensations. And if that happens, we want to ask ourselves, can I be with this sensation? And if I can, maybe I can stay with it a little bit. But the most important aspect here is to teach the nervous system that it can change its own state and that it can bounce back, talking about resilience. So then we want to actually shift our attention from the unpleasant sensation, from other sensations that maybe we can find in the body if we look again. Maybe if I have a pain in my right shoulder, I can scan my body one more time and see if I can find another area of my body that is feeling, pleasantly or at least neutrally. And we call this shift and stay. So if we manage to find a neutral or even pleasant sensation, we want to stay with it for 10, 20 seconds, because we are generally biased through our evolution to look for the negative aspects, for those signals that show us, okay, there's danger, you need to do something, you need to fight or to flee. But if we want to teach our nervous system to stay with the positive, we need to soak it in. We need to give it a conscious attention and energy. So let's do this right now. I invite you to choose one of these strategies.
Andrea, I want to say that I've been practicing while you were guiding it, sort of, as you were explaining to us what we have to do. And I can share a bit about how it felt. Actually, I chose the glass of water, and it was a good choice because I was thirsty. So my throat needed the water. And so what happens, and it's something that I use as a strategy many times when I'm bumped out of my comfort zone. What happens is that the shift to me comes into the sensation part where the fresh water I associated with, sort of this wave that comes like a wave of water, of fresh water that comes, and I can feel it in my throat and coming down. Well, it starts in my mouth, and it feels refreshing, but in the same time, I associate it with a mental state of, okay, whatever I'm going through right now, this wave of fresh water just comes and kind of soothes, my nervous system in a sense. And because many times it's fresh water or cold water, you can feel it as it comes, going down into your stomach. So just the shift from whatever is going on in that moment to that sensory part of how does it feel like to have this glass of water right now is really helpful.
Thank you, Lila. That's great sharing. Marius, are you ready to share with us?
Yes, and I chose a strategy to name 6 colors, and they were mainly warm colors like orange, like yellow, like fuchsia, and neon green, and even red. And they all remind me of the warmth of summer. And for me, it's just a feeling of relaxation and allowing some of the tension to be released from the body. So it's generally pleasant sensations. Thank you.
Thank you, Marius, for sharing. So as you can see, these strategies seem almost childishly short, and maybe you might ask yourself, what is this? How is this 1 minute practice going to help me? But actually, whenever we drop into the body, for example, I chose to squeeze and feel the texture of a funny squishy, a toy, which, by the way, as a tool is very, very popular with children. And when we experience sensations, of course, we always experience sensations, but when we put our attention on what we are feeling in the moment, that's when we kind of detach ourselves from whatever was bombarding us, because it may be an intense emotion, which is usually related to a thought that we had, and it's many times things that come from the past. We're thinking of something that happened already, which we cannot really influence right now, or we are worrying about what will come in the future, and we forget many times to just be in the present, while our body, our sensations are happening right here, right now, and reconnecting with them actually restarts this process of balancing the nervous system. And I think, Lila, we can go further to the next slide. This was the description of our activity. So what we did by going through these practices was to do a process that we call tracking what's happening inside, tracking sensations. And as I just mentioned, this tracking connects us to our body in the present moment and has this amazing ability to restart this process through which the nervous system can rebalance. And how it does that, and we can go even further, it does that by teaching us what are those signals that come from pleasant, well-being state of mind and emotions, or it can show us the signals characteristic to stressful situations. And if we go to the next slide, we see that when we reach this point after more practice, where we can make the difference more and more easily between, oh, these are signals that tell me that I'm stressed. Oh, these are signals that tell me that this is a nice, peaceful state. Yeah. So when we get to this point, we are much more able to actually choose what to pay attention to on the inside. Yeah. Because now we recognize more easily these different signals. And if we remember our let's say self-reg wheel of 5 steps, we remember that step number 4, we usually start by reframing our behavior. But as Lila mentioned before, we can enter each of the 5 steps once we get to know them really well. The 4th step is the circled one, the one on the brown color, that's called reflect, yeah, or enhance stress awareness. So through these practices, this is what we're doing. We're enhancing this stress awareness. So the moment we feel the signals of stress, that's when we know that we can shift our attention and stay with our attention focused on something else, maybe more pleasant, more positive, that can bring us out of that difficult state, either a risky emotion or a very troublesome thought, or sometimes even sensations themselves, because we can have sensations of pain, and sometimes we can stay with the pain, and other times it's difficult, so we can look for different areas of the body that feel better and focus our attention there. Because what we put our attention on grows. And I think Marius can show us a little bit more about that in the coming slides. Marius.
For the next practice we can focus on, and let's see what grows from here. It's called resourcing. Resourcing can be done with ourselves as adults, but we can teach it in class as well. So resource is any person, place, thing, memory, or part of ourselves that makes us feel calm, makes us experience pleasant sensations, get a sense of being strong and resilient. It can be real or imagined, so it's up to our mind and to decide what is best for us. And the resource can be internal or external, so we can reach deep inside for our own personal resource, or we can think of something external. And just to make it a little bit more obvious, I would invite you as the audience, but I would also invite my colleagues to settle more comfortably in the chair or on the sofa, or wherever you are. You may keep your eyes open or closed, however it feels right for you. And I invite you to bring to mind maybe a person or an object or a memory or an experience that is a resource for you. And so that brings about a state of calmness, a state of maybe kindness, gentleness, strength. Okay, and I would encourage you to imagine it vividly. Try to see it in as many details as possible. Try to bring it to the forefront of your attention in the smallest possible details. And notice how it feels for you. Notice what that object, person, memory, experience brings about in your body. Maybe it brings about pleasant sensations or neutral sensations. And you can choose to stay with those sensations if they feel good. Or if they bring about unpleasant sensations, you can use the shift and stay approach by focusing on another part of your body that feels good in the moment. You may now open your eyes if you had them closed and look around the room, feel your body leaning against the chair, and slowly come back to here and now. Of course, it feels different from all of us, but the resourcing practice is allowing our mind and body to settle by using something internal or external that is a resource for us, or that is imagined or real. Whatever works for you in the moment, bring it to mind vividly. You have this option, and it also acts as balancing the body, stabilizing the nervous system, keeping us in the resilient zone, or helping us get back to the resilient zone if we were bumped out.
Thank you, Marius, for that. It was sorry, Andrea, I interrupted you.
No, I just wanted to thank Marius because he guided it so nicely, and I always like his voice and the pace, and it's really, calming and nice to be guided in a practice.
Yes, I wanted to say the same, that it was a nice moment for me as well. And as you mentioned at the Help Now strategies, I remember myself being curious, but at the same time a bit judgmental when it came to certain practices because they seemed too easy. They seemed too simple. They can't possibly work. You can't just take a glass of water and it's going to feel better. You can't just, close your eyes and bring to mind something, a person or anybody, that's helping you feel better about yourself, and it just works from there. It's not like a magic trick. And for such people that I've experienced this myself, so that's why I want to bring it up. I think it's important to mention that it takes a sort of a leap of faith, and you don't have to reach to a point where you have nowhere to turn to, and this becomes the only resource. I think that staying curious and with an open mind and heart to at least try and see what's going on, it's such a form of self-respect and self-compassion, because before anything else, I want to be better with myself, and I want to stay in that, even if it's childish to me also means curious, and I deeply appreciate this quality of children being so curious and willing to try things if you present them, in a playful and nice way. So I invite you to try and be curious like that and stay open to these resources and try them at least. Another resource that we are using, and this is especially with the children in school. I use it at home with my son. It's the treasure chest that can also be made, and it's a fun activity. It's a sensory activity because you have to decorate it, to paint it, to put it together and cut it and everything. And so it can be an individual activity that each child makes, this actual chest box, but it can also be group activity, a collective, and this is where you bring forth other skills, as communication and teamwork, and you can use different tools like sensory toys or cards. This is a beautiful resource that we use in class because we put together there all the things that throughout the weeks of experimenting with different tools works for us. And so we put it there. And so we know that, okay, it feels like right now I'm going to the yellow zone, or even worse, I'm already, in the red zone. And I know that something works for me. So I have this treasure chest where I can go and I can find something that works for me and makes me feel better. And this treasure chest can be situated in what we call the quiet corner, right? The where part.
Yeah, I will interrupt you just for a second before you go on explaining about the quiet corner. Just very shortly going back to the treasure chest, because we experimented with Marius that beautiful practice of bringing to mind something that makes us feel good. And sometimes that something may not be physically available to put in a treasure chest and have it with you either in your personal, chest or envelope or whatever you make as a so-called chest, or in the common chest, the treasure chest of the class. So an activity that we sometimes do with children is ask them to draw, make a drawing of that resource that helps them, being a person or maybe a pet or a place they visited that made them feel really good, and have that drawing in their personal treasure chest. And sometimes we just ask them, okay, we start this activity by putting our treasure chests on the table, and take out one of your drawings and just remember how that place or person made you feel. You can touch the drawing, and then you can drop in the body again and feel whatever sensations this practice brought up. And I think it's a very it's an easier and equally beautiful way to use the resources that are not and cannot be present in the class.
Yes, Andrea, thank you very much for that. This quiet corner is this place that we can decorate, and we can locate it in our classroom or in our home, where children learn that it's that place where they can take a short break when it feels like they need to settle down and they need to self-regulate. It's also the place where, to begin with, you need to co-regulate with them. So a very important mention I have to make is that in order for this quiet corner to work, we have to co-regulate with the children, and we have to model how sometimes when me as a teacher or, as a parent at home, I go through a stressful situation, I find that place to be very comforting, and I always find there something that helps me, right? And although this might sometimes put us in a more vulnerable position as teachers, it is the most beautiful and simple way that we can really teach children that that's a safe place. You don't go there because there's something wrong with you. You go there because you need that time to settle down and to go back to the green zone. So I would go there, as a teacher and say, okay, it feels right now that, the class is overwhelming, maybe the noise or something, and I need some time for myself. And I know that in that quiet corner, I have that treasure chest, or I have those tools that we have put together where for a few moments I can stay there and I can come back to the green zone. And as you can see, there's many things that can be made or that can be explored with the kids in class, because they might have different preferences of what works for them. So there can be different things. But of course, the sensory toys part help a lot, different books, because, we also teach children how we are different and how that's okay too. So the quiet corner is a beautiful way of doing that. And also the moment when we do that, we've learned throughout these years that sometimes, as we have reached the conclusion that coming twice a week and teaching social emotional learning as a separate subject, although it's really relevant because you still get to be with the kids and you still get to present all those concepts and do all those activities, at the end of the day, social emotional learning is something that we want to integrate throughout everything that happens within a school. Right? So that if you begin the day with your children with this circle time, right, in the morning where they are fresh, they have just reached the school, and maybe hopefully, their energy and attention level are at the peak. So we can have them sit together in a circle on the carpet, and we can talk to them about how they are feeling that morning, what's been going on with them. What has happened, something that they want to share with the group, just offering this possibility of connection. Connection is such an important part of the learning process. It's how we make sure that we have to begin with this connection with the child, so that in their words, because they feel safe in our presence, they feel seen and they feel heard, they can open up to us and they can learn whatever we are offering. You know how many times, even in my experience, I can think back in my school days, and I remember how the fact that I really liked the calmness and the openness of my literature teacher, for example, it's what made me fall in love with that, and what made me want to explore it more and learn more about it. And so we want to have these activities throughout the day, and the morning is a good time when we can have it during our circle time, but also, as we said, with the quiet corner during class or in different breaks between classes when, you are with the kids outside playing, or we can observe different things going on. And that's a possibility for us to notice and to reinforce different concepts, like, the self-regulation concepts that we've mentioned, and the zones of regulation, with the colors and the zones that we notice kids are being in different such zones throughout the day. So I've already entered a bit, and the reason why we've put this at the end was that we sort of wanted you to feel and to learn more before we have a certain, definition of what social emotional learning is. But of course, there is such a definition. And I will let either of you, because I don't know which one of you wants to share more about this.
I'll go. So it was a lot, wasn't it? And indeed, in the end, it's a complicated yet simple way of tapping into the human, the basic goodness that is present in us and everybody else. It's a way of bringing it to the forefront in education. So as you can see, CEL is an integral part of education and human development. It's not something that is separate from us. It's just shifting our attention from the single focus of education to including this wider aspect of well-being in ourselves and our students, relationships, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness. So it's a process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions, and achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. So we all want this. The idea is how to bring it forth in class is to be the focus. How can we make this the focus of our attention? Because what we put our attention on grows. This is not by excluding everything else. This is by making whatever we do inclusive in SEL. And there's studies behind this that show that adding or including or embedding SEL in your classroom and in schools shows a lot of benefits, not only to academic results, but also to behavior in class, to attitude and emotional distress. So it shows an increase in all well-being factors in classes where SEL was explicitly or implicitly taught, usually explicitly through a curricula. And there's increasing evidence showing what we know in ourselves, in our souls, that if we teach from a place of kindness and make sure that relationships are first, we address not only the cognitive but also the emotional needs of children and ourselves, we can have better chances of thriving.
Thank you, Marius. This is my favorite slide of them all. We've had the honor to have Ed Dunkelblau a few years ago here in Romania, and within our school we had a big conference with him. He's the director of the Institute for Emotional Intelligent Learning in USA, and we have learned so much from him during that conference, but also in our interaction day to day, because he was in school with us. And I remember that we were at that point in a sort of a crisis within the school, because we were exploring so many things with the children, and sometimes it felt like it's not working, and we had all these expectations because we were extremely excited and passionate about our work. But of course, like with anything else, you want to see the results immediately. And I remember specifically him sitting with us, with his calm voice and very soothing attitude, trying to explain to us that this is a long-term process. just with anything when it comes to your own self-development. This is a journey that you are taking with a lot of trust and a lot of patience. And we know from all the resources that we have used, but also from a lot of the information we've gathered from around the world with such programs, that it takes from 3 to 5 years of, practicing these skills until you really see certain results. But the one thing that is really important to mention is that the social emotional learning part, which has become, this extremely popular subject since a few years ago. It's not something separate, as Marius said, and it's not something that we add on our plate, although it might feel so, because we as educators or as parents, we feel there's so much we need to learn so that we are there in the best way possible for our kids. But it is the plate itself, because once our children learn how to self-regulate and be better with themselves, of course, the educational process is easier. So then this is a beautiful plate, and we encourage and we hope that the things we have explained will keep you curious to learn more about this. And I will come back to the one thing I said I would keep coming back, which is having this patience and this gentleness with yourself. I am now specifically talking to educators and caregivers in general. This is hard work. Taking care of a baby, whether you're a parent from its birth, and then welcoming a child into a school and a community is the hardest job in the world. And we are here to say that because this is so hard and because there are so many other stress factors in our life, it is more important, even so, to take care of ourselves and of our needs, and to make sure that, just as we learn where we're on a plane, we need to put the oxygen mask first on ourselves. And this is an invitation to explore that even further and to work with what you need so that you can really be there in your context with your children at home or in school.
Thank you, Lila. So not only social emotional learning and the idea of well-being stay at the foundation of everything else, and especially the learning process. So they're the plate, they're also a process. Yeah, so it's we didn't come here to give you a program, but just invite you to start a process. And we looked at least in the second part, we looked at resilience. We went through a few practices. We gave you a few ideas related to the what, the practices, the how, and the where, and the when of how we can, of applying social emotional learning. And where we ended with this, the definition that Marius went through, the definition of social emotional learning. And I think Marius will close by telling us what is next. Marius.
And what's coming up next is life, but a way of deepening the practices that we've did here in our webinar is by taking the C Learning 101. And this is by Emory University. They developed the site, and you can see in the link, there is a 6-hour introductory course where the educators are invited to do some practices, share some reflections on what it means to them to practice these for themselves and in class. We highly encourage you to, if these topics are of interest to you, we highly encourage you to take on this course. And for sure, we together as Cerc, Andrea, Lila, and myself, we will delve deeper into these topics in the coming webinars, and more specifically with the focus on the C Learning curricula. I hope you take the most out of this and benefit yourself and benefit others as well. I would really emphasize what Lila and Andreas said, that it's a process and it takes time and gentleness, that we are in this together. So we are learning, we as educators, together with our students and our wider community. And so it will take time, patience, and as well as togetherness to go through this, as this is just the beginning. Thank you very much for your kind attention. And I'm sure and I hope we'll see each other again in the coming webinars.
Thank you, Marius. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care. Be well.
Bye.